everyone, I hope you're all doing really well and welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to this Bumblebee tutorial. So we're going to be carrying on with where we left off in part 2, and for part 3 I'm literally just going to be continuing on with the body, drawing in that back leg, making the body look quite sort of fluffy and fuzzy. And then in the following parts we're going to be drawing in a little bit of this like lavender flower that it's sort of sitting on. So I'm going to be using similar colours to what we've used so far, especially in part 1 where we made a start on like the head of the body. And yeah, just start drawing in some more of those stripes. So I'm going to start with the really dark bit in the middle, and I think I'm going to go in pretty much straight away with the black. So I'm going to start with the ivory black Derwent drawing pencil because this is such a pigmented colour. This is definitely my favourite black coloured pencil. It's just so like waxy and pigmented and dark. So I'm going to start by applying it with a medium pressure in this dark section of the body, just to really get that intensity in there from pretty much the beginning. It does feel quite like thick and waxy to work with. It does pick up a lot of that grainy texture from the paper initially, but don't let that put you off. There's like a little bit of the lavender flower that's kind of around this area here at the top of the leg, so I'm just sort of shading around that. And whilst I've still got the black in my hand, I'm just going to apply it to this sort of stripe on the back of the body as well. So you want to make sure the edges of the shape that you've sort of shaded in, make sure the edges have like a few elongated lines coming out of either side. So when we draw in the section around it, all of those tiny little hairs kind of merge together. So I'm applying a few layers over the top just to make sure that black is really intense. I've not kind of squashed down the tooth of the paper completely. You can still see a little bit of that grainy texture underneath. So I'm going to leave it like that, I think, for now with the ivory black Derwent drawing pencil. And over the top of that, I'm going to go in with the black polychromo. This is actually nowhere near as pigmented as the ivory black Derwent drawing pencil. That's why the Derwent drawing pencil is definitely my favourite in terms of like the intensity. But this is good just for kind of blending out that ivory black and just filling in and squashing down the tooth of the paper. You can be a bit more accurate and precise with where you're putting it as well, because obviously polychromos are predominantly oil based, so they're quite hard. So they're much better for detail and being precise, especially around like some of the edges and for detail. And for all these little fine hairs along the edges, if you just want them to kind of merge with what we've got down so far already. Kind of flick some of those lines into this yellow section of the body. So you can see how that's really filled in the tooth and it's looking a lot smoother now. We can't see hardly any of that grainy texture from the paper underneath. So I'm going to do the same for this section as well. I wouldn't usually go in with a black straight away, but because these two sections are so intense and so dark, there's not really any point in kind of building up any colour underneath. Because it's just going to get covered anyway with this really dark colour, so we might as well just go straight in with the black. Thing you want to make sure is that the end of this sort of yellow stripe that we can see through the wing is in line with where it starts on the body, and at the minute mine is not quite in line. So what I'm going to do is use the Tombow eraser, which is a really fine rubber, and just kind of erase the top left hand side of this black section, so when I draw in the like yellowy golden part of the body, it's in line with sort of the rest of the body that we can see through the wing. Like that, just a bit of a minor tweak, but that's quite an important part. So as a base layer for that section, I'm going to use the Naples Ochre Luminance pencil, which is like a really pale yellowy colour. And try not to kind of drag any of that dark pigment into this area, because it is quite, you know, vibrant. We don't really want it contaminated with any darker pigment. And then I'm just going to use a little bit of this into some of the like highlighted areas in this dark section of the body. So I've left out a few little shapes here and there that I'm just going to fill in. Like the top of the leg. A little bit where like the foot is. I don't know if bees have feet, but if they did, for the sake of this tutorial and for my descriptions, I'm going to say that bees have feet. So I'm just filling in the little foot at the end of the leg with the Naples ochre, just adding in that nice yellowy sort of base layer. And then I filled in the top of the leg where it still looks quite hairy, again with the Naples ochre. As a base layer for the back of the body, I'm going to go in with the silver grey. This is more of like a really pale, like slightly blue tinted white, so perfect for this colour in the back of the body. I've kind of got a little bit of a darker section here, and then it goes pale again. What I'm going to do as well is sort of smudge out some of these individual darker hairs, so the transition from this black section into the lighter part of the body is a lot smoother, and everything just kind of merges together nicely, just so you know it looks a lot softer. Kind of blur out that grainy texture that we've got a little bit. I think you might also want to use the white Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle pencil. This is again my favourite white pencil, it's so pigmented. I've used this quite a lot in this tutorial so far. Just going to use that to also help us kind of smooth together or blend together the edges of the black stripe with this lighter stripe at the end of the body. And keep sort of switching and changing between your white and your silver grey. So I'm just building up loads of little lines really, especially towards that outer edge. And then using the white to sort of fill in the lighter section of the body with a hard pressure. And have a few little lines slightly elongated and flicking outwards to add to that fluffy, like fuzzy sort of texture of the body. And then again kind of smudge that out with your white Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle. Might just use the Tombow eraser again, just to neaten up where it meets the wing, just right at the top. Just remove some of that pigment there. And then you can always go back in with your black polychromo just to do some sort of black little lines that you're kind of weaving into what we've just drawn in. So you're kind of flicking back down into that lighter section of the body. And those little hairs should merge together a lot better now. They should look a lot softer now that we've kind of smudged everything together underneath. Back in with your silver grey just to kind of soften any of those lines if you need to. And same with the white museum aquarelle. Might use the cold grey 3 polychromo just to fill in this little bit here that's slightly darker than everywhere else. And then back in with my black. You're kind of like constantly flicking between these different pencils to get exactly the effect that you want. Back focusing on this golden part of the body, I'm going to go in now with the raw sienna, which is a gorgeous orangey colour, and just add a few light layers of that into this section of the body. Maybe apply slightly harder pressure where that colour is more intense. So sort of around the edges and as you approach the wing. And then over the top of that, I'm going to go in with the cadmium yellow. This is actually a watercolour pencil, Faber-Castell watercolour pencil, but if you've got the polychromo then use that. I'm just using this because I don't have the polychromo version, I've just got the watercolour version, but the colours are exactly the same. So I'm just going to apply this in the lightest, like brightest part of the yellowy golden section, just to keep those colours really vibrant. Like that. I'm going to add a little bit of the shade Sanguine to the top of this golden stripe where it meets the black part of the body. Just do a few quick little lines kind of merging the two together. Flicking down from the black into the golden section. I'm going to go back in with my Tombow eraser and just erase a little bit of this golden part of the body where the light is sort of directly hitting it. And then into where we've sort of erased, very, very lightly, you want to go in with the light yellow glaze polychromo. Next up, I'm going to go in with the green gold polychromo and use this around the edges and to add in little bits of darker detail. So I'm just doing constant repetitive, like short linear motions with my pencil just to build up that texture. Next up, I'm going to use the dark sepia, which is a really dark brown, and do the same along those edges, sort of neaten up the shape of this golden stripe a little bit. I'm going to go back in with the raw sienna briefly, just to really work into that edge and sort of soften where the black meets the golden orangey colour. And sort of blend that together. And then I'm actually going to use the craft knife slice tool, which I don't really use at this point often. I usually leave this until the end, but I'm going to use this just to sort of tweak the shape and enlarge this area. And again, by doing short, quick, linear motions just along the edge that kind of flick into this darker stripe of the body, it just helps everything to merge, and it helps to create that sort of fuzzy texture of the bee. Also, you want to start doing a few at the side of the leg as well that are also flicking into this dark section that we can brighten up later on. So once you've used the craft knife slice tool slightly along that edge, you can then fill that section in again with the Naples ochre, which is kind of what we started with, just to brighten up that little bit, and then build up your colours again. So from there you want to go in with your raw sienna, which is more of the orangey gold. And maybe add a little bit of the cadmium yellow as well. And a little bit of the sanguine just along that lower bottom edge, just where it kind of meets the leg and the wing, like that. So yeah, I think I'm happy with how the body is looking. We can always make the back of the body a little bit darker as we progress and draw a little bit more of the bumblebee, but for now I'm going to leave it like that. So I'm just going to start drawing in this leg and add a bit of detail to that now. So using the dark sepia, I'm going to sort of outline the shape of the leg. And draw right down to its little foot where we kind of shaded before, and fill in that little bit. And if you look closely, it's kind of like in tiers like this. I'm going to flick back into the leg just to create that kind of fluffy texture, showing that the leg at the top is made up of all these little fine hairs. And then I'm shading in the leg. So it might look a bit weird and like I've left a big gap here, but we are going to fill that in the next part when we start drawing in the flowers. I'm just adding a bit of detail to these little shapes that we left before. Next up, I'm going to go in with the shade Bee Street and add some darker details into the leg. Just kind of building up those short back and forth motions so it looks like tiny little hairs. Might just add a little bit of the Naples ochre to extend some of these hairs at the top of the leg, kind of flick them out and downwards. I'm going to add a tiny little bit of the cadmium yellow just to like the middle section of the foot or the leg, sort of around about there. And then I'm going to use the Bee Street just to kind of shade in the lower half of the leg. Just added a little bit into the darker part of the leg as well, just to add a bit of a lighter brown tint. And I might also use the raw sienna just around the outer edges to add a bit of like a golden glow. And then back in with your dark sepia, just to define and darken other parts of the leg. Just added a few more little details and lines into this fluffy part of the leg at the top. I'm going to use the silver grey just to bring this back body part out a little bit more towards the left, just by adding a few more hairs. And then maybe just go along that very outer edge, so it's a bit more defined against the white paper. I'm going to use the craft knife slice tool on the lower half of the leg, just to add a bit of a highlight where the light is hitting the leg, sort of from the left hand side that way. And then I'm going to do some little hairs coming out of this top part of the leg. I might also just add some lighter details into this golden part of the body, a few little hairs. And then with the Naples ochre, I'm going to work into kind of where we've just etched away with the craft knife slice tool and kind of fill in some of those lines. I always try and wipe my pencil, especially when working over darker pigment, because it does tend to pick up some of that darker pigment on the tip of your pencil. So just kind of give it a quick wipe before you add further pencil strokes, just so you're not kind of contaminating the area that you're drawing. And then into this section here, I'm going to go in briefly with the sanguine for those more like rusty, burnt orangey sections. I mean, there's only like a little tint of that colour, nothing more than that. And then you want to go back in with your shade Bistri just to define some of those shapes. I'm going to go in with the dark sepia to tweak some of the edges. I feel like we're using quite a lot of the same colours, but I'm constantly flicking between them all to kind of get the desired effect, or just, you know, for little bits of detail here and there, I'm constantly flicking between my pencils. And then I think I'm just going to finish off with the light yellow glaze, which is this really bright yellow. Just add a little bit of that into this section here. And all these tiny little highlights. You might just want to go back in with your beastry. This is what I mean, I'm just constantly flicking between all my pencils. I can't put them down. I think I've nearly finished, and then I'll find something else to kind of tweak. I'm just going to add a little bit of darker detail around the bottom of the head as well. It's also fine to keep going back to areas that we have pretty much finished in previous parts, but because we're kind of building everything up together, it's okay to kind of revisit them. So yeah, I think we're pretty much done for part 3. So part 4 is going to be a very exciting part, because I'm going to be starting to draw in those flowers. And like I said before, I am going to do a little bit of watercolour in there, I think. A bit of watercolour and a bit of coloured pencil, because I want the attention to be on the really detailed bees, and I want the flowers to have a little bit of detail, but mainly be quite like loose and soft, slightly out of focus like they are in the reference photo. So yeah, we'll see how we get on in the next part, but I'm going to leave that there, I think, for part 3. So hopefully you should now have the rest of the body and the completed Bumblebee, really. There might be a few more legs going on here and there, but obviously it is quite difficult to tell and differentiate what bit's part of the bee and what bit's part of the flower, especially just underneath the bee, because there's so many different shapes and shadows going on. It is hard to differentiate them both, but I am going to leave that there for part 3. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and as usual I've left the reference photo, the materials list and the line drawing in the video description below. I can't wait to see all of your works in progress, so keep tagging me in all of your drawings on social media, and I'll be back very shortly with part 4, where we'll be making a start on the flowers, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of the week.